Well, I lived in Iran up to when I was 16, and I lived in a generation before the internet or very early days of the internet. So we were really suppressed as youth of Iran at the time. We were told to be meek and obedient, and we didn't have the advantages that the youth of Iran have these days. So at the moment, we can see what's happened in Iran is one of the first female-led revolutions that are happening in our time. And the main protesters on the streets are young girls from the ages of 16 to 22. And these are girls that have grown up with the internet, and they've grown up with knowing what's going on in the outside world and what they're missing out. So they are angry and they are fed up with what's being forced upon them by the Islamic Republic.
And do you think that's what makes this different, that they know that there is a freer life for them without the sort of suppression that you went through?
Absolutely. I mean, at the moment, the advantages of the Iranian diaspora and the people who have left the country is that we can be the voice of those people. There is only so much that the Islamic Republic can do in terms of limiting the amount of coverage that's going outside the country right now. They have tried to limit the internet and access to Iran, but there are still ways for people to find proxies to get the news out. And I feel like we are now helping this movement by keeping it alive and keep the momentum going, while this is escalated from people asking for the removal of compulsory hijab to now asking for basic human rights, ask for regime change. So it is definitely different this time.
Yeah. To your point, though, the regime is targeting students, and they can be very brutal in the way they are cracking down. You know, you're so right about the diaspora, like yourselves, keeping the message getting out. But at some point, will they have to consider continually putting themselves into danger?
I feel like the Iranian population are doing everything within their power at the moment to do what needs to be done. What it comes to is it's up to the West and the Western countries, US, UK, and people in the free world to support this movement, to support this need for democracy and regime change in Iran, because we have seen misinformation coming out in the news recently. It's not being covered as much as it should, and the Western powers are not making a strong enough stance as to what's going on in Iran. There was a New York Times article that came out that put the protests down to economical crisis, which is extremely inappropriate and wrong, and undermining the pain that these families of murdered girls are going through. And the president of Iran was chairing UN meetings while the protests were happening. This cannot be right. The Western countries need to make a stronger stance rather than just condemning these actions. They need to freeze assets. They need to put on further sanctions on the officials, not the people. They need to impose travel bans, and it needs to be something that is not just verbal, because Iranians wear these condemnations with a badge of honor. That not the Iranian people, the Islamic Republic. They love these condemnations because they see it as a victory for them. So I think it's time for us to step up in the West and help this outrage.
Do you think, though, that we've seen sanctions placed on this regime before, and even before this regime, which has only become even more conservative? To your point about wearing that as a badge of honour, they point the finger elsewhere every time to sort of domestically distract from what's happening.
Yes, I mean, any sanction that has been put on Iran is put on the Iranian people. The Iranian people are the victims of these sanctions. They can't get medicine, they can't get products, they can't travel, they have to become immigrants in other countries. These aren't the type of sanctions that are necessary right now. There needs to be sanctions on the people that make the decisions, on the Islamic Republic. And if these sanctions or if these stances had been made earlier, then none of these would have happened. My own father was taken as a hostage for 5 years in Iran as a result of previous deals having been made. So had the Western countries stepped up and said no and made a point of not dealing with the Islamic Republic, none of these would have happened. None of the hostages would have been taken, and they would have been crippled and disarmed. That's what needs to happen now.
Yeah, and to your point about your father, who was a political prisoner there for 5 years, he has been released recently, earlier this year. He's run the London Marathon just to highlight what is happening. Does he, having gone through what he has, does he see that as critical to continue this sort of external pressure?
Absolutely. I think it's now a sense of duty for us, for my father, for me, to carry on the fight, because him coming out of prison is just one battle that has been won, and at a cost. So we need to now seize this moment so that all these efforts haven't been in vain. My dad has come back, but a lot of other people haven't. There are still Iranian hostages being taken. There are still hostages in prisons. And not to mention the 86 million Iranian people who are hostages within Iran who can't go out, and the Iranian diaspora who can't go back in. So everyone born in Iran is, in a sense, a prisoner of the Islamic Republic. So we need to use our voice, as small or as big as we can, as much influence as we have, to get the message out and really make it happen this time.
Elika, great to get your perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.